Hello everyone, this is Dan with the Spiritual Underground Podcast, coming to you once again from the studios at the wood shop at DTM Enterprises. Speaking of, we'll get some of this out of the way. If you have woodworking needs in your closet that you need done, you want something custom made, you want your son's name made out of wood, you want a piece of furniture, you see something on Pinterest that you would like to have but don't know how to find it, or it's not exactly what you need it just like this but a little bit different, holler at me. You can find me at dtmww.net. That's my website for the woodworking shop, or any of the other avenues that I'm going to talk about for a minute. The music around the podcast is by a gentleman named Darren Frank. I've talked about him. He's been in the hospital dealing with some health issues. Your continued prayers are appreciated. He is on the mend, so that is great too. SpiritualUnderground.org is where you can find show notes. That's the website that supports this podcast. You can see pictures of the guests. You can also find a contact me page there. Let me know. Give me feedback on the podcast, what you think, what you don't like, what you like. If you need some help, holler out. Maybe we can help you. And finally, 12-Step Spiritual Recovery is a book by James Christopher Cone. It can be found on Amazon. The full version is in both a Kindle and a hard copy book, and then there's also been broken into where there's a volume 1 and 2 of it in a hard copy form. That where the part volume 1 is how the spiritual sickness manifests in you, and steps 1, 2, and 3. And volume 2 is step 4, the inventory through 12. So once again, James Christopher Cone, 12-Step Spiritual Recovery. So we'll get to the real business at hand here. Have a guest today. I just keep on being just totally excited about the people that come in here, and I've been excited to get Alex in here. I haven't heard his story, but I've heard people who have heard it. So that's also a cool thing, is to sit here and get to absorb it like one-on-one. It's a little selfish kind of thing. I get the story. I get all the attention is devoted to telling me the story, and that is cool. So Alex, about the time I came into the Spiritual Underground, Alex started coming. It was funny because I started talking to him a little bit, and he had told me that he had been sober for some time, and I'm going to let him tell it. I'm going to tell it from my perspective as I remember just quickly, is that he had been sober for some time, but had still found something missing in his life. There was something that he was still searching for, and I believe a friend of his had pointed him towards the Spiritual Underground, specifically maybe AA, but to see if maybe he couldn't get what he was looking for there. And then the rest of the story you will hear here shortly. So I remember meeting you, and it didn't. I was like, well, if you're already sober, what are you doing here? So we'll start out with the sobriety date. How you doing today, Alex?
I'm doing good. And first off, I'd just like to thank you for this opportunity, and just to get to see you. We've known each other for a long time, and see all the kind of miracles that occur with you and all the juice that you got. And then to sit here and watch you do your thing, just on the start of this, is a lot of fun for me. You get to see where that juice, fulminates right now. So it's cool to watch. My sobriety date is, I believe it was around June 20th or 21st of 2011. So I'm about just past 8 years now.
Yeah. That is very cool. And so because you really didn't hit a wall like a lot of us do in the way of like our sobriety dates, like mine is pretty solid, like bam. You kind of, so you actually, I think you celebrate the 20th. Is that, I think, if I'm not mistaken?
So, and I could probably,
it doesn't really matter law by the day, but it's like we pick one and go with it, right?
I know it was the third Wednesday of June in 2011, just because that was the day that I went to the temple, and I meditated with the monk, and I talked to him about what was going on in my life, and he just said, you're going to either quit drinking or quit meditating. So that was, so I know when it occurred, but I couldn't tell you when my last drink. I probably drank, maybe the night before, maybe a couple of days before, but I couldn't tell you 100%.
So that's like your shift.
That was that was the day that it was like, this is it.
Yeah, well, there's a term we use when we say that And darn, it's left me, but maybe it'll come up. So one of the things that I always, we do this AA thing, and I'm not. We try not to say AA. We try not to say last names on here, but fuck it, I don't really care. Of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So one of the things I like to do to make sure, because I know that I've had this thing. I've been carrying this, whatever this malady is, from the time as long as I can remember, from childhood. And I know that there were some things that happened to me while I was a child that exasperated that condition. Mm-hmm. So I like to go back and talk about how we were brought up, what kind of family system you had, and move forward from there. Okay. As organically, I don't want to dwell way back there, but there's always something to be learned. I think to that common denominator in all of us that feeling out of place as a kid, having certain things happen. So how'd you grow up, Alex?
So I grew up in a family of we had there were 4 kids in my family. I grew up a Catholic, went to Catholic schools, raised very much in a Catholic community. You went to church there, you went to school there. All your social events, all your athletic events were around this Catholic community. My family, and both my immediate family and all of my extended family on my mother's side went to this particular church, went to this particular parish, went to this particular school. And so it was very much, everything was encapsulated into one thing. And so, your identity, once that's set in that, just both in my family system, and in my immediate family, my extended family, and my church and my sports and everything kind of gets wrapped into one thing, and you become that person.
Yeah.
And for me, my family I had 2 loving parents. I had my sisters, I had extended family. We all kind of, that's who babysitted us. We didn't ever kind of venture out of that system. And so all of that was the norm. So for me, I came up and at a very, I was, hyperactive. I had a lot of energy. I had a lot of movement. So, I quickly somehow became in this system. I kind of became the bad kid. I was the kid that got in trouble. I was the kid that, broke the glass in the street. I was the kid that, shoved a cupcake in somebody's face. I was, the kid picking on people and fighting. And it happened where I was the bad kid in my family. I was the one that kind of got identified as maybe in dysfunctional systems, you would call it the scapegoat. There was a lot of anxiety in my family. There was a lot of fighting, a lot of yelling, a lot of screaming. It was, like I said, a good Catholic family. So there was mild physical abuse and moderate emotional and verbal abuse. And that was, that became very much a part of my story and who I was. And looking back on it, I was acting out of a lot of the anxiety of everything that was going on in my house. I couldn't handle that. I can remember being very little and getting up at 5 a.m. and hearing the fighting start right from the beginning of the morning, and walking to school hours before it started, and they would come get me. I remember it being dark. I remember being by myself, but I just had to get out of that situation. And, as it progressed, I became more and more that person. I became more and more that bad kid, both at my house and then an extended family and then at school. And then once I was identified that, and that's your whole world, that's everything you're the bad kid when you come home, you're the bad kid when you go to a family event, you're a bad kid when you go to school. So at some point very early, I made the decision, fuck it. If I'm the bad kid, I'm the bad kid.
I will be that.
I'll be that bad kid. And I'll be the meanest, toughest kid there was. That kind of developed. My one respite was sports, because all that physicality and emotion and anxiety was accepted. So my violence wasn't punished, it was rewarded.
Right, yeah.
So I was, you'd look down on me and judge me as I walked out of school, or, I showed up at the house, or wherever it was. But when I was on the field, you judge me for shoving a cupcake in your kid's face, or starting a fight, or coming home with my head busted because I had fought kids in the park. But if I was on the field, if I was wrestling, you're gonna clap, you're gonna cheer, you're gonna tell me how good I was.
Yeah, you get, like you said, you get rewarded for the same behavior in a sense, in an acceptable outlet.
Right. So that became, there was a dual
It's a little
identity.
confusing, that it's landing on me that, like, okay, where do I draw the line about how do I be aggressive here and not there? I'm allowed and actually encouraged to be really aggressive on a wrestling mat or on a football field.
Right.
And when I come off of there, I'm supposed to just turn it off.
Right. And there was no off for me. So for me, it was always on. And I could pull it back a little bit. But it was, looking back on it, it was just a manifestation of anxiety. It was just, it didn't matter whether it was on the field or where I was at. It was just, I was anxious. I didn't know how to behave in the situation. I didn't know how to live with the rules of society. I couldn't ever put it together and put my homework together, or do the dishes right, or, I couldn't ever get right.
Yeah.
Everywhere I went, I was wrong.
Yeah. Another bell ringer thing. My kids have a thing at school they call it bell ringer, and it's some kind of, it doesn't even mean anything what it means here. But what happens here is I hear these similar traits and these things, like you said, that just is so in line with what I hear, and what I felt was that this fear of being wrong too. I didn't like it being wrong, and it seemed like everywhere I went, I was fucking wrong. And it just started like giving up. So then you go, okay, if I'm gonna be wrong, I'll be really wrong.
Right.
Yeah. Here, I will show you what wrong is.
Right. And that's, I'm absolutely, I could never get the rules. I could never get what you wanted. And I think in my household also was highly critical. And, running around with a bunch of Catholics tend to be I won't classify it as that. But from my perspective as a kid, things were highly critical. Like the nun that was my principal was highly critical. Like I couldn't ever get it right. And I'm sure, like I said, I couldn't. It's that learned helplessness. Like I can't be right. No matter what I do, I can't get it right. So I'll just do what I want to do anyway, right? So at least I'll have some fun while I'm doing it. So that was a big part of my story, and I'm sure there's more as far as you could analyze it and break it down and all these other things, but that was one of the things for me was not understanding the rules. And even today I have a hard time being organized, and doing things the way that a large system wants you to do them. It doesn't make sense to my brain. Like I can't keep focused on that situation for a long period of time. So I started off like that. I started off with this anxiety from a family system that was dysfunctional, that was very intense, that was fairly critical. So I started off with that anxiety. I kind of developed this identity that didn't ever get to be mitigated by a different system. All of my systems were wrapped into one function, and it was all within a little 3-mile square. Is my whole world was that, and so, I continued on. I picked up that moniker of being the bad kid, and I just went ahead and took it. And I used sports as an outlet. But everything else was just like, fuck it, I don't care. I'm not going to pay attention to it. I'm not going to pay attention to what you say. I'm just going to do what I want. I was a fairly intelligent kid, but my schoolwork, because I was wrong all the time as far as my behavior, I just said, fuck that too, and I pushed it over to the side. I continued, I'd say, once I got through grade school, I went to a Catholic high school. Sports were very, very dominant, and that was something that was really important to me because that was the only identity that I got to be good at, and that was the only kind of rewarded system that I felt. That was the only thing that validated who I was. I was bad in all these other situations over here, but by sports, I had some sense of accomplishment, some sense of value. So that became really important to me. When I knew
Rob Gus too, you were probably good at it.
I was good at it. I was.
So you could feel that internal fulfillment of being good at something, or these other things I wasn't, I was wrong. But here, I was actually excelling. I was doing well. I was could be patted on the back, so that those the reward systems kick into place.
Right.
And go, hey man, I really like this being good at something.
Right. And that absolutely was my how I viewed it. When I went to high school, though, I was a good athlete. I was a decent athlete. Let's put it that way. But when I got to high school, I thought I was going to be a football star. Well, you know what? You're not going to be a football star if you run a 5 flat 40. I just wasn't super fast or explosive.
Yeah, the competition increased.
And the guys that I were competing against were 6'3" and running 4 540s. Like, I wasn't a starter. That brought a lot to me. That being my only sense of identity brought a tremendous amount of shame because I wasn't a starter. I wasn't a standout. I wasn't this. I and that really would be when I had that first kind of break. That was of my identity. That was when I started drinking. I started drinking when, like a lot of kids do, snuck down to a friend's basement. They had a bar full of liquor. We started emptying out the peach brandy into our cups and getting drunk.
How old would you say you were?
I was 14.
Me too.
So when we were 14, we started dipping and using tobacco and smoking and smoking a little bit of weed. And started drinking, and it really, like, as I bring up and talk about it now, that really kind of coincided right with my, my not being great at my desired sport, and I luckily, even though I wasn't great at football, I found wrestling. And where flat out speed didn't matter as much, but determination, just hard work, the willingness to kind of deal with pain, mental toughness, just an unwillingness to stop. That really served me well, and I'm very lucky in that manner because as I developed that kind of kept me from really overuse of alcohol and drugs. It kept it tempered. So there was an on season and an off season, right? There was a season in which I could drink and party, and there was a season in which I didn't, and there was a reason why to get up and train, and a reason why I couldn't drink that night, and a reason why I had to hold off for periods of time. So I continued to use through high school, but like I said, it was tempered. It was, off season. I would go out and drink, and after wrestling season, though, it was time to party. It was, I would drink a couple of times a week, go out with friends on the weekends and drink and smoke. And I was pretty limited in that. I was afraid of everything else going through high school. And go ahead.
That's really parallel. I hear a lot of parallels. From I found an escape in sports also, and I ended up doing similar to you. I would temper it when the season was on and other things were going on. I'd already started smoking, so I'm trying to play basketball and doing like a cardio sports, But at that time, I still, everything was young, so it didn't hit me. I was telling myself, this don't affect me, right? This doesn't, I can do both. And then I ended up getting kicked off the basketball team for smoking pot. And when I lost that, when that was taken away from me, I remember that gave me the big case of the fuckets, and I had no reason to temper anything anymore. Boom, off and running on the dope and alcohol, because of what they did to me. I ended up getting kicked off the basketball team for smoking pot, So it's interesting, that's what so I get in trouble for the very same thing that I reach for afterwards, in a similar way, which you were saying, like, I'm going to be the bad boy. And then you kind of probably caught some consequences over being the bad boy.
Oh, yeah.
And all it did was made you the worst bad boy.
Right.
Made you do it even more. It's interesting how we like buck those rules. Like you said, I don't want to comply with the system.
Right. And from, on that aspect, like, I did suffer consequences and I did want to, buck it more. Transitioning from the grade school to the high school allowed it to be opened up a little bit. So I wasn't quite the bad boy then. Again, the bad boy in the Catholic school that I was in was still so mild compared to what you might see or think today or in a public school. Another instance of that is like, so I got caught drinking in my sophomore year, and the way I got caught drinking was I got so drunk that I got into a fight with a kid from a rival school, and he was like the toughest kid in his Catholic school, and I was kind of like the toughest kid in my grade of the school. But we were a little bit buddies, but we were a little bit rivals. And I got drunk, and he was bigger and stronger and faster than me, and we got into a fight, and he decided to ping my head off of like a cattle railing, like it was out of the fairgrounds. We got into a fight. He kind of beat the heck out of me. We rode home in the same car together. We went out drinking together after at different points after that. I know him now. We're friends, but I got caught that way, and so everybody talked about it, right? And my high school wrestling coach, instead of kicking me off for that situation, and it might have been different if it was marijuana or something else, but it was drinking, and that's maybe a little bit more accepted, especially in the Catholic and system. And he told me, he said, 1, you have to tell your mom, and 2, you have to go to these alcohol classes inside of your school. In our school. So instead of me getting kicked off and having the case of the buckets after that, I had to go through these things. It didn't stop my use, but it definitely it was a reaching out moment from somebody, and looking back on it and hearing your story, that was a kind of a big thing for that person to reach out, because that let me maintain my sport. He was like, if you don't do this, and he told me at the time when he did it, he said, look, you could be wrestling for the state championship if you just work. It was like, but if you take this other path, then you're not going to have that opportunity. Yeah, what a cool thing to have somebody in your life like that come in. That's an angel, to come in rather than, I didn't get offered any of that. Right. I just got sent to the pen, just you're done. And they told you you can come back and try again next year if you want. Now, I went from being a relative star. I was playing, so I was always playing or sitting on the bench of the grades ahead of me. So I was getting to be at least play a little bit of varsity as a JV. When we were in junior high school, I was able to go up and play for the JV in high school, or at least sit on the bench with the JV team. So it obviously was playing above my level. Wow. And then all of a sudden, whenever they told me to come back, I couldn't make the team.
Now, I know that's a dual fold. I know that some of that comes back on me.
Right.
But also interesting that they, that I wasn't able to make the team the next year. After being so good, I didn't have somebody stick their hand out and say, here. Or at least I don't recall it.
Right. And that was one of the, biggest. There are lots of things that I can say I didn't like about my Catholic schools and how I got raised and how I got disciplined in some of those situations, because it kind of did help develop that identity of being, not just the bad kid, but angry at the systems and not trusting the systems. But to have that, I do distinctly remember that situation and know that was a life-altering situation at this time. I hated it at the time. I hated that I had to go tell my mom that I'd been drinking, because my mom was raised in an alcoholic family, and she always told me from when I was young, she kind of either identified some traits in me or it was just stuff from her dad that she was pushing down towards me. But it was very much, I understood that we had alcoholics in our family, and that I was likely to become one, or I needed to watch for it.
Very good, man. That's something I think needs to happen, and I don't hear that a lot. I hear a lot of the opposite, where families actually, like alcoholic families, encourage their, will actually provide and encourage an alcoholic lifestyle,
right?
Rather than warn and say, "Hey, be careful. This is back there."
Right. And you look at it, and I can remember being mad that my mom pushed this at me and pushed this identity towards me, and I was like, "What the hell are you talking about?" I drank like 5 times, like I'm an alcoholic.
Hold on, yeah,
but
totally reject the premise,
right? And being mad about it, but then as you hear it like that, you're like, "Oh yeah, no, it is ignored in other families, and the behavior is ignored in other families," and that certainly wasn't the case in mine. There was severe discipline. You get grounded for a month if you got caught or anything happened, or like it was grounded for a month, and things were taken away, and you were stuck. Like you got to go to sports practices in school, and that was it. Like everything else was off the table.
Yeah. So what was the class like at school? Do you recall it?
Yeah, and it was actually a class not for alcoholics. It was a class for people that had alcoholic families. Whether it was a direct alcoholic, so it was almost like a little, it was like
an Alateen
5 or
something.
6 kids. Some of them had got caught drinking. Some of them did drink. And some of them were families. Well, I had one kid in there that I love to this day. He's a good dude. But he had never drank. He never took a drink in his entire life, but he was in there. And I really, thinking about that class now, I have a lot. It's probably why I'm so, I feel so close to that individual, even though we don't talk a whole lot, and how much admiration I had for him and how much help he really kind of put to me, because he was an athlete. He was a star football player. This guy, he ended up making it to an NFL team.
Oh, wow.
Not the usual route, not some standout like Division I, all this. He went to Center College, worked through AFL teams, did all this stuff, but just that kind of guy, and he was very helpful for me in that situation as well. The class was, and it just talked about alcohol use and alcohol in the family systems, and I can't remember all of it, but it was very much, I can remember breaking down and crying and talking about all the friends that I had that drank, and that just how that was the norm, and how is that okay, and but this is the system, this is kind of the environment that I'm in, so how do I live with this? And I can remember being disturbed by it, but also not being able to stop, not being able to buck the trend of going out with friends that do drink and not drink, or get friends that didn't drink. Like, I didn't even know how that was possible. I don't know, how many friends I would have had in a Catholic school if I went with all the people that didn't drink, and maybe more than I think. But I
was curious if it was a positive experience, and it sounds like it was.
Yeah, and at the time I didn't like it, and I couldn't wait for it to be over. It couldn't wait for me to be able to be out of it.
Yeah.
But in recollection, it was very much a positive situation. It was one of those things that, I don't know how much it helped me stop at the time. Maybe it just gave me a little bit more awareness so that when it was time to get out of the madness, it was easier. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So high school, and you started wrestling, and was that your primary sport? And
so I still played football. I wasn't that great. I special teams guy or whatever. But then wrestling, I was kind of. We had a lot of good guys on the team. I ended up. I wasn't like a phenomenal athlete. I was just a hard worker and very determined and put a lot of effort into it. Worked all the time at it, and I got good. I got to where I ended up getting second in state. The guys that beat me were very, very good guys. That I ended up getting a small scholarship to a Division II school, not far from my family, and so I took that and went on to to wrestle. And when I got up there, my use so here, the norm was it was still to drink. Up there, you'd think maybe the discipline level and the competition level would up it, but it was really almost like a drinking team when I first got up there.
Where's up there? Where?
It was in University of Indianapolis. So it was in Indianapolis, and it was the guys were. They liked wrestling. They liked working hard, but they also liked drinking. The competition level kind of got a little bit better. Our team got a little bit better as I progressed through. Some guys some of the people that were more interested in drinking, they kind of graduated, and some guys that were more serious about wrestling kind of came into it. But drinking and using and smoking pot which is surprising. You think you wouldn't smoke pot and want to cut weight, but there was a lot of that went on. So my use kind of increased. The other big thing is so my freshman year in college, I'd come home. I'd cut 25 pounds in 5 days. I did it to get to the national duels. To start at the national duels, there was an open spot due to an injury, and so I did this. I kind of put myself through hell. I came out of it. I ended up the next week. The coach, was mad at me for not cutting the weight again and trying to wrestle off the guy, and I got mad, and I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to cut 25 pounds to go wrestle the team captain who beats the hell out of me every day. That's and for a tournament that doesn't matter. I got mad, and I went home. When I went home, I met up with the guys that I met up with all the time. They were some of my best friends. Hey, there's a party down here. We started drinking. We went to a little restaurant spot. We jumped. I was driving. We jumped in the car. We were headed down to a college for a fraternity party. We had a discussion on the highway. Which way do I go? Do I go this way? 264. Do I go 64? My buddy in the front seat says 64. Other guys say the other way, but I listen to him in the front seat. My buddy Matt. We continued on. We saw 3 police cars driving the opposite direction on the interstate on I-64. I got distracted. I had been drinking, and I can remember us saying, "Man, they're going after somebody." And as soon as I said that, I looked up, in the car in the right-hand lane lit up. And the inside of it lit up, and it was enough that it shouldn't occur. And I'm driving 70, 75 miles an hour, and right around the bend comes a car head on, driving the wrong way on the interstate, and that's what the police were chasing. And head-on collision. He's driving 70 miles an hour. I'm driving 70, 75 miles an hour.
Cow.
We spin out. I can remember looking down on my body. I could see my body slumped over. There was smoke through the air, and I was almost like transitioning with the smoke. Then I came to. We all check each other. Hey, how's everybody doing? How's everybody doing? Everybody okay? Everybody responds except for my buddy in the front seat, Matt. He's slumped over. There's fluid coming out of his mouth. And immediately there's tons of, there's police and EMS and emergency vehicles and firefighters and everywhere. My buddies in the back seat were able to jump out immediately. I was trapped in the car. I'm yelling for my buddy to wake up, to come to. There's one of the paramedics or whoever it was came to the car. They were yelling. They were asking me. They were talking to me. I said, "Leave me alone. Get my friend. Get my friend." I'm screaming at him to leave me alone. One of the paramedics or police came up to the car and checked my friend, and he asked the time to somebody, and I immediately knew what that meant. And I started screaming. They covered up my friend with a white sheet.
Wow.
While I was trapped in the car. When they had to cut me out, cut the doors off, and the whole time I was just staring at a white sheet that used to be my best friend, one of my best friends. And they cut me out, and they flew me down to the university hospital. I can remember the flight paramedics making jokes about how cold it was. And all I could think about was, this is the worst day of my life. And how can you be making jokes? But, it was a regular day for them. I went down, EMS. I ended up being fine. They prepped me for surgery, thought for sure that I was having internal bleeding. But I ended up being fine, and I ended up getting released the next day. Or not, in the morning. And that was a huge experience for me. I had to go, going and talking with his family, having to go through the funeral. I can remember in my head just being in shock the morning of this happening, and just telling myself everybody has to go through this. That was what I had to say to myself to get through it at the time. Going through the funeral was the hardest thing I'd done to that point in my life. And that was a huge thing to me. After that, I really adopted I already had a sense of guilt and shame that I grew up with, and a sense of inadequacy and not being good enough. But this complicated everything. It complicated how I used drugs and alcohol. It complicated how I dealt with people. It was very much, looking back on it, it was very much a point in which I was ready to start making emotional changes, I think, in my life. But it kind of shut all that down. And my only thing that I had to be good at something. I had to be good at something. I had to use sports to work this out. I didn't have anything else. And so, I don't know.
So there was no consequences from the standpoint of that you were drinking, I guess, because the other guy was plainly in the wrong lane.
They tested my blood when I went down there. I was at .08.
Back in those days, it was 10.
It was legal as 0.1, and I was a minor, so they probably could have done something. I think they chose not to.
Wow.
Like, I think maybe if I was from the wrong side of the tracks, or it was a little bit less, if I'd had that that blood alcohol and it wasn't so obvious that the other person, the other guy was
Right.
He was driving at a .4.
Yeah.
This was his 4th DUI. He had been in jail before.
Did he live?
He lived. He got out. He walked away. He thought he hit a parked car. He didn't know. He didn't even know he was on the interstate.
I've seen a couple times where somebody has something similar happen, a pretty traumatic thing, and I don't know if the universe does this or if the system does it, of allowing somebody to not, don't arrest you. I've had a buddy, I've had friends that's had really bad car wrecks, and not get any trouble for them.
Right.
Drunker in hell,
Right.
and get really hurt. And spend some time in the hospital, and I don't know why it didn't happen. Why they were basically allowed to escape any consequences. Sounds like that kind of happened with you in legal consequences. Now, from a standpoint of an emotional consequence of being the driver of a vehicle that a
Right.
best friend died in while
Right.
you were driving, I just can't imagine how you. I don't know how you reconcile that.
And so legally, I can remember them. Yeah. So they chose not. I think I was from. It would have been a bad decision, I think, from the prosecutor's point of view, to do that. But you're right. Like, absolutely, that could be a different story. 100%.
I have another friend that's here local that, and I'd like to get him on here too. That had a similar kind of thing happen where he had a wreck while he was inebriated, and his best friend died in the car, and I think he spent 11 years in prison.
Yeah.
Or something. I know it was quite a few years.
Right.
That he went to jail or went to prison for manslaughter.
Yeah, and that if the circumstances were a little bit different, I think I absolutely would have got prosecuted. And I think there was.
You kind of look at this stuff. One of the things that our sponsor has taught me is I have a completely different way of looking at things today. You know, and I start thinking about how my higher power was on my side all along.
Yeah. And for me, knowing how much that hurt, it's hard for me to reconcile and say, my higher, in that situation, I all the bad things that could have happened after it, didn't, from my perspective, but it's so hard for me to look at it knowing all the pain that is caused.
Yeah, right, yeah.
In particular, his family. And to watch what occurred to that family after the fact, and the pain that they've gone through, the parents and the cousins, and his sister and my best friends that were his best friends, and to watch that pain, watch the guys that that were in my car with me. One of them still won't drive on the highway. I mean, it's like. To watch all that pain go around, and then to say, hey,
Yeah, I'm by no means am I insinuating there was no consequences.
Right.
There are plenty of consequences.
Yeah, and for me, but it's still hard for me to say God was on my side of that. Yes,
I see what you mean.
I got
you didn't receive
protected,
a personal
right, but to watch
legal
that
thing
is it's still hard for me to look at that. It's still hard for me to, I've got together with his parents a few times as an adult, and kind of now they can't do it anymore, and that hurts.
Yeah.
That hurts because I love them and I know how much it hurts them, and
they can't do it anymore because of the pain. They just don't want to.
Yeah. And so, I just recently made an amends to his best friend, and it was a very good amends, but still to know how much it hurt him.
Yeah.
Hurts me.
Yeah, man.
And, at that time for me, there was no reconciliation. For me, I would sit in a dark room and cry. I try to push it into wrestling, but my success wasn't that great. I had kind of met another level of peak. I wasn't as good as the guys in college. And so me trying to push that into that, it wasn't very effective. I worked very hard, but when you're not getting the results that you expect, then you can't. I just didn't internalize that as me again failing my friend.
Yeah.
I failed him. In my perception, I failed him the night because I didn't protect his life. I didn't kill my friend. That man who was driving the wrong way on the interstate, he killed his friend, but I failed to protect his life because I was drinking. And, if I wasn't, maybe I had enough reaction time to avoid it. But I failed him. And so then when I went out and competed, I very much was trying to devote some of that to him, and I wasn't winning. And so again, it felt like a failure. Some of my use increased. My use as far as using other substances. I got into where, I'd use ecstasy, and once I started using ecstasy, I was like, I'm going to try coke and meth and anything else. So I got where when I was going out and partying, I was doing bad stuff and getting to where, staying up all night using cocaine, using methamphetamines, ecstasy, weed, whatever I could get my hands on. Mm-hmm. Luckily, I still had wrestling and still had enough devotion to it that it had some guardrails for me. Like, even though I wasn't as super successful, I had some guardrails.
Yeah,
and
kept you in the road. And
as I started to kind of fail at wrestling or not win as much as I would like, I found MMA. I found jiu-jitsu and fighting. And started doing where I was doing. At that time, it wasn't even called MMA. It was called No Holds Barred. But I kind of stumbled into this room through a friend. I got fired from a job because I was drunk. I called in drunk. I didn't even call in. I was like, hey, I can show up today, but I'm still drunk from last night. So I got fired from a place called Rock Bottom. And, my buddy had said, hey, can you come to this practice with me? I'm scared to go alone. And I was like, I tell you what, if I'm fired from this job, then I'll go with you to practice. And they were like, yep, you don't work here anymore. So I was like, sweet, I'm going to practice. So, I went in there and I was I was good right away. Like, my ability to withstand a lot of pain, to keep fighting, my determination, my wrestling background, and it just kind of opened up for me, and I started to have started to succeed very fast in that. Now at the same time I was using. I was going out and I was partying, and I was on a medical red shirt for wrestling because I'd hurt my neck, and so I was kind of out of the pocket in wrestling and drug testing for the NCAA. So I was kind of doing whatever I wanted, and I was partying. But again, I had some other guardrails up. I had something to keep me moving in one direction, and not to veer off too far. I started, and that was very much, again, that was just something that was there for me. I wouldn't have kind of accepted any other success but that, and that was my way to, it was a way to channel all that grief and hurt and pain. Like, I was a big tough guy. You can't sit around your room and cry and let all your wrestling buddies see that. Yeah. You can't go and tell somebody on your wrestling team how you're really feeling about life and that you're crushed because your friend's dead and you feel guilt and shame about it. You can't. In that time, I didn't really have relationships and with girls strong enough that I could communicate that kind of thing. I just didn't have anybody that I felt like I could do that. Another thing that happened at that time is I started to deny my spirituality, partly because it was all tied up to Catholicism and dogma and the treatment of, the concept that I was the bad person. So, like, this judgment, but also my friend died, and I couldn't reconcile that pain with, somebody that cared and loved about me. So all of those things kind of moved at one time. You know, a denial of spirituality, a use of drugs and alcohol, and then you know, this channeling of all of my pain into one aspect, and that was fighting. You know, if you got a lot of pain and you're channeling it all into one direction, you might be good at it. And I was good at it. I was very good. You know, all that violence, all that aggression, all that pain kind of channeled at it, and I succeeded at a fast rate. And within like, I can't remember if it was a full, it was maybe 2 years. 1 year I was already, you know, I was kind of undefeated in the local circuits. I was traveling around. I again got hurt in wrestling, so I stepped all the way out of it. I went ahead and started fighting full time. Finished up college. Now I was on my own to do whatever. I didn't get a regular job. I just worked odd jobs while I fought. I made a little bit of money fighting. As I moved forward, that became it. Drugs, alcohol, and fighting, and that was it. So I was getting ready for a fight. I abstained. I worked my ass off. I trained as hard as I could with as tough of people as I could, and then then I'd fight. And when I made a pocket full of cash, and then I partied and I did whatever I wanted to do for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever I could until that money ran out. And then the process started again, and I looked for a new fight, and I went forward. I think within 2 years, I was fighting on the UFC. I don't even know if it was a full 2 years. It might have been just 1.5 years. I was on the UFC. I lost that fight, but I picked up a fight in Japan. I started doing well. I ended up fighting in getting on 2001. I picked up a fight down in Brazil. It was like a 16-man tournament. I ended up finishing and beating 4 Brazilians in one night. I was like the only other person to finish at that time. I don't know if it still holds true, but at that time I was only the second person to ever finish 4 fights in one night. The only other person to do that was Hoist Gracie. Dang. So from there, I got moved up and picked up by a fight company called Pride. It was a kind of bigger company. It was a Japanese rival of UFC, and at the time they paid more and had some tougher fighters, bigger events, 80,000 people at the Tokyo Dome, sellout, national TV, everything they had was over there. So I got into that, and I'm just this kid from Kentucky training with some knuckleheads, and we're breaking into high school wrestling rooms up in Indiana to train because we didn't have a gym, and and I'm now, the next thing I know, I'm walking out in front of 20,000 people, 20,000 Japanese, ready to fight one of the toughest dudes in the world, a world champion in jiu-jitsu, and it was very surreal.
I imagine.
And
I can't imagine.
It was almost like living inside a video game for a little bit of time, and it was crazy. And again, it was the same pattern. It was train, abstain, and then when I won and I got a pocket full of cash, let's party. Yeah. And not just me party, everybody around me is going to party.
It was like celebrate,
Celebrate.
What did you say? What was the first 2 words you said? Pain, abstain. What did you say?
Train,
abstain, and celebrate.
You're right.
Train, abstain, celebrate.
And so
it would make perfect sense. I mean, golly, you do this and you work it that hard, and you've buckled down so hard to get to the fight, and then to do and then execute it, win or lose, really. Mm-hmm. But if you win, especially, and hell yeah, well, what else would you do but go out and celebrate?
And it was, you go out and you celebrate. Next thing you know, you're at you're partying at a bar in Roppongi, Tokyo, and it's a wild experience.
Surreal.
Very surreal. And it was very surreal, especially being, 23, 24 years old, and just, and having this feeling of not being good enough my entire life. And everything that I did was driven and to get rid of that feeling.
Yeah.
And to go from that and have people tell you, you know, you're not going to be a shit. You're not an athlete. You're slow. You're not good enough. Like, what are you going to do when you grow up? Like, I can remember being young and just having that feeling of people trying to grind me out and just trying to take away who I was and to push me down and to tell me who I was and tell me I was a bad kid. And to have that inferiority and that inadequacy from such a young age, and to have all that, and then to come up and then, you know what? Fuck you. You see me now? Fuck you. And that's very much the attitude I developed. And I was not a good winner. I put that in people's faces when I came back. Like, fuck you. You know what? I stared you right down just like I would stare down a fighter. This is who I am now. What do you think now? And validation. And of who I was and what I was. And, you know, that I wasn't this person that you said I was. And also, again, that was a huge thing for me to deal with my grief. And, like, the belts that I won and the trophies that I won, all that stuff, I would put it at my friend's grave. And so I very much wanted world championships, and for my own validation, but I also wanted it to, you know, to somehow prove that he hadn't died for nothing, even though that seems ridiculous at this time. But that was the only way that I could show this, that I could do this. And so I won, and I was doing these things, and I was, you know, making, you know, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 in a fight. And it wasn't very long. It wasn't very long at all. Like, I had the big tournament. I had a big win on the big show. I had a couple of those. And on the second big win that I had, you know, it was after the fight. Went out to Roppongi, went out to the bar area. You know, I have the best fighters in the world surrounding me at this bar and think that I'm a cool guy. I have groupies hanging out at the bar for me. Girls that just because I'm on TV and just because I'm who I am, and they, you know, they want to be around me. I'm on alcohol, weed, cocaine, ecstasy, everything. And I can remember coming out of the bathroom with all, you know, all this, the music going, boom, 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 everything's going off. And I looked around and I thought, this is it. This is everything that I worked for. This is all that I wanted. And I still feel like the same piece of shit that I've always felt like.
Yeah.
None of this fucking matters. And after that moment, my career took a nosedive. You know, I was slated as the next guy that was going to be a champion. I was, you know, people were telling me, you're going to be the next champion of Pride. You're going to be fighting these top guys. You're going to be making all this money. And after that moment, like, there was a recognition that, like, all of my work and everything that I was doing was worthless. That it wasn't going to bring me happiness. Like, this wasn't going to bring me peace. This wasn't going to change who I was. And that took a very long time for me to incorporate. I couldn't quit fighting. Like, I kept fighting, even though, like, I kept training, but it wasn't the mindset that I had before.
The drive was not there anymore like it once was.
And the drinking and alcohol, that started to pick up even more. And again, it was always tempered. You know, I would, you know, do the same kind of patterns. But I started to fall off. I started not to be able to do it. Within maybe like a year, I'd taken a lot of losses. I'd gotten to where I was like 16-1 or some nonsense like that, or 12-1 or something. I can't remember what I was. And then after that moment, I started losing. I lost 4 fights in a row, and then I win a couple fights and then lose fights. And I couldn't really sustain any momentum after that. And it took a very long time for me to pull back. So that happened in 2002, and I really didn't get out of the fight game fully until almost 2009. 2009 was the last fight, but I really didn't get out of it until about 2006 or 7. So there was about a 4 or 5 year window when I really struggled. And
do you still get paid if you lose?
You get paid if you lose, but it's half the amount of money.
Yeah,
and then
right, yeah.
So if you're on the best fighting show in the world, you get, and you're winning, you're making $30,000 a fight, but then you lose, and then now guess what? They don't renew your contract. You go down to the lower ranks, and you're making maybe you're making $4,000 a fight, and you lost it, so you get $2,000. So you just spent 6 weeks to make $2,000.
Mm.
So not quite the, and then you'd get one big fight a year or something that kind of kept things going. One of the other things that occurred is, so once this happened, and I kind of started to increase my use, and my drive to fight wasn't there. I got drunk. I drove at a high rate. I was driving like 100 miles an hour on the interstate. I wrecked up. I caused like a 6-car pileup. I ran from the cops, missing a tire, jumping barbed wire fences. And that was another big thing for me. And I did that. And, that was after my friend had died. And, so then it was failing my friend again. It was failing myself, putting everything in jeopardy, putting other people's lives in jeopardy, putting myself in jeopardy, putting my career in jeopardy. And
they caught you.
They caught me, yeah. And this one, I suffered some consequences. Not a lot, like a week in jail, paid some fines, lost the car. No, it was out in Utah. And it was, so I did have that. When that occurred, my trainer, again, I had a coach that kind of reached his hand out when I was in high school. My trainer, who's now my father-in-law. He was my Muay Thai coach at the time. He saw that I was screwing up my life, and he saw that I was on a downward spiral. So he took me to a Buddhist temple, and at the temple, they did a cleansing ceremony. My body started to 12 monks tied a piece of yarn around my wrist. They all held it. They chanted. My body started to sway and move, and this went on for like 45 minutes, and I couldn't figure out something else was going on, and that kind of opened me up. That opened me up to spirituality, to something beyond what I'd experienced before, and through that, so over the next 4 years, trying to quit fighting, quit that identity of who I was before, and pick up this new identity. I got into meditation. I got scared of it. I quit drinking for 9 months, but I couldn't hold it. I started drinking again. But the whole time I did that, I was reading and studying spirituality until I got to and I had my use. It started to kind of trend down. I was using, but I wasn't using like I was before. I wasn't doing quite as much as I had before. It wasn't quite the party that I had before. Probably for financial reasons.
Yeah.
There was still a consistent use, and there was a use of benzodiazepines to relax and on a real consistent basis, drinking 3 or 4 times a week. And but all this time, I was studying, reading spiritual material until I got to where I finally made enough money. I was like, all right, I'm going to go to massage school. I'm going to quit fighting. I need something else. This is not working for me. I'm losing. I'm not good enough anymore. I can't do this anymore. And I finally made a jump to do, and of all things, I went to massage school, from professional fighting to massage school. And then I met a guy there. It turns out he was in AA. I had no idea. But he was and he was into meditation. He got me meditating. He told me, hey, you got to be sober to do this. And I didn't quite understand that. So when he said you have to be sober to do this, I thought like, okay, well, I better meditate at 4:30 today because I'm going to get drunk at 5. Like, I'm going to start drinking, so I better meditate early. But I did that for 4 years, like that. Things started to get better. My life was still chaotic. I still couldn't really make things work. I did get married. I got married to my trainer's daughter. We moved back to Louisville. I started, things started to get a little bit better for my life, but I was really struggling. I had gone down to where I was working in a warehouse for like $9 an hour, and I just couldn't make a living, and I couldn't do these things. I had a college degree, and I was a professional athlete and all these things, but I couldn't make anything work.
Did you actually go to massage school? Did you do
I
that?
went to massage school, and I did massage, and I did it for a while, but then when I came back to Louisville, the economy went to crap, and so nobody's when you can't afford your house and you're getting foreclosed on,
nobody's doing the extras.
Nobody's doing the extras. Nobody's spending the discretionary income, and so I did that. So I kind of got on massage. I was just doing whatever I could do, and then we started going up. I would go to this temple, this Thai temple, with a Buddhist monk, and I told him, I said, and I was going every week to go meditate with him. I was cutting his grass. I was doing all these things, kind of service work for the monk in the temple. He lived by himself, and I would do what I could. And I told him one day, I said, man, my meditation's good some days, bad other days. I can't make anything work in my life. And he said, that's because you drink. He said, there's 5 precepts for Buddhism, and he said one of them is no alcohol. He said, you're not even living on the basics of the spirituality that you want to follow. And I knew immediately, like, he was like, you'll either quit drinking or you'll quit meditating. And I could look back at this point, and now we're talking about years of reading spiritual material, 4 years of meditation, daily, twice a day, every day. And to look back and be like, okay, I know alcohol and drugs have never done anything for me. And this is the only thing that has given me some sense of relief in my life was meditation. And I knew immediately when he said that, and I was like, fuck. Like, I had a plan to go get like once a year drunk that week. I was going to get so stupid drunk I peed on myself. Like and that was going to happen on Friday. This was Wednesday. And I was like, damn it. Like, I was like, this is like, I have to stop. And I knew, like, I was like, okay, maybe I can give myself one more drunk. And I knew that if I did that, then that was it. Like, that was the choice I made. That was the place I was going. That was where I was
stood at the turning point.
And
had to decide what fork of the road I want to take.
And
it's interesting.
And I did. And so I stopped. And amazingly, I guess because I'd been meditating for that amount of time and I devoted it and I made that choice when it was that choice, I was kind of spared that whole craving. And I was never the point where I drank every day, and I never was at the point where I used drugs every day for the most part. I'd used some benzos every day for a couple of years, but I'd quit those a number of years before that. But so I didn't have like a physical craving for it. It was just like how I dealt with everything else. But I didn't really have it. It wasn't super difficult for me.
I could understand that.
And looking back, if you had told me I could quit drinking without caring about it, I don't think it would have I wouldn't have believed it, But I really do believe that it was the meditation for that long, in that period of time, and that quiet, and that accessing of spirituality, that allowed that process to happen for me in the way that it did.
Yeah, it's getting in touch with that inner self, that higher self, all that, and getting grounded in that way. I could see how I was having a conversation last night with Robin about different ways that people quit, stop their stuff, their bad behaviors,
Yeah.
And I'm kind of a little bit, I'm biased on the 12-step thing. And so it doesn't make any sense to me how somebody can just stop.
Right.
Because I could never do that, One other thing, just real quick, because I like I had a little bit, I came into recovery. I hit some bottoms, which really weren't even bottoms compared to what I hit later. And what when I hit my bottom that I didn't know where to go with, when I was breaking those houses and got caught, my path back into the rooms was through a meditation group. That's where I couldn't go to AA. I couldn't go back to meetings. I just couldn't. My pride and ego wouldn't let me do that. But there's a guy having a meditation meeting, and I could go there. Mm-hmm. And that was the gate.
Right.
That got me back in. And then when I actually ended up getting with the sponsor that we have today and working the steps, I had 6 months of meditation practice under my belt.
Right.
And that was like the value of that was unreal. And this is your deal, but I went like 5 months of that meditation meeting, just going on Saturdays, and maybe meditating once in a while if we get together with some guys. I never could really do it by myself.
Right.
And then and I remember it was like someplace in the beginning of December, I walked out of that meditation meeting with a bell go off in my head, how good I felt walking out of that meeting. And I heard people talking about doing it every day. They did it on their own every day. All for 5 months, I heard people talk about that. And it took that, and I went, and I made a personal commitment to myself that night to start meditating every day.
Yeah.
To get up in the morning, and I'm going to meditate in the morning, just like those other people talk about. And, and then my sobriety date was about 1 month later. My current sobriety date.
That's awesome. That's, the meditation piece for me is invaluable. I would not be able to do anything. And I will preface this, I am terrible at meditation. Like, I am not good at all. Like, I've literally had meditations where I sat and thought about how I can make $1 million for half an hour. That's what, I'm not good at it. So anybody listening saying I can't do that, well, you just have to sit still and breathe. Like, that's all you have to do. And it will take much longer if you don't practice some form of it. But it's still helpful. And it's helpful at any level of sobriety. It's helpful at anybody, even if you can't maintain sobriety. And I couldn't maintain sobriety at the beginning of this. I wouldn't have done it because I didn't have enough tools to do that. I didn't have enough way to cope with who I felt I was, or the picture I thought I was, the story that I was telling myself of who I was and who I've always been. I couldn't deal with that on my own. And the meditation allowed opening for that. And then it also allowed me to be able to hear where my next step was supposed to go. And I believe that started from the day my father-in-law took me to the temple to get that cleansing. Like, I started to be able to hear what my next step should be. And it was very slow at the beginning, but then as I did meditation, it increased my ability to hear where my next step was to go. And then when I went to AA, I got sober, I got better. Then when I went to AA, and my ability to hear what I needed to hear to my next step, it just kept doubling and increasing tenfold, like, as I took these further steps. And so, yeah, that was where I started, was through the meditation. That started me on my sobriety. The unfortunate part is, like, I was meditating twice a day, not very effectively, but I was meditating. Things were getting better in my material life. My, wife, I was married, we had children. I started a new career to go back to school as a nurse for nursing. I did all these things, and these things got better. But I still was very angry about who I was, who I thought I was, and I was unhappy with myself. And it wasn't going to work in that situation. Just meditating and being sober was not enough for me. And it was another breaking point was me and my wife. We would have these terrible fights. Like, she's a little bit crazy, I'm crazy. You put that in a pot and you mix it together with kids and no money and a lot of stress, and shit pops off. And we would have these yelling, screaming fights, and we had always had this dynamic in our relationship. And this is a dynamic that I probably carried from a childhood. She carried from a childhood. We put it in there together. And I can remember we were in a screaming fight. My wife's now she's my trainer's daughter, so she's been trained in Muay Thai for her entire life. So, like when I say she's hitting me, she's not hitting me like a girl's hitting me. She's full on man punching me in the face. I'm picking her up. I'm throwing her on the couch. It is a full on fight. I'm not striking her, but she's striking me, and I'm wrestling, and I'm doing it. And we have maybe a 9-month-old and an 18-month-old staring at us while we do this.
Whoa!
And just absolute, like, just the look on their faces was just like, what is this world? Like, what is this? These people that love and care about us are doing this to each other. Like, what is this world? And I was just like, I can't do this. I can't do this. Like, I'm going to get a divorce. Like, I would either go back to using, or I probably could have gone the rest of my life without drugs or alcohol, but I probably would have killed myself. And I don't mean that like in like kind of half using, like, that's not a euphemism or anything like that, or a phrase. Like, I would have fucking killed myself. I used to have a running dialogue in the back of my head. I never owned a gun in my life, but this dialogue in the back of my head would say, put a gun in your mouth, put a gun in your mouth, put a gun in your mouth. You deserve to die. You deserve to be beat to death. Like, this literally was voices in my head over and over and over again. And if the track slowed, I had to keep busy all the time. And if I didn't keep busy, then I would hear that track. Put a gun in your mouth. Put a gun in your mouth. Put a gun in your mouth. And I didn't have any answers. And so I had been, I don't know, like, I had to go to AA for like a nursing school requirement, to one meeting.
Yep. We see them. Student nurses are in there fairly often.
And so I'd been suggested before by somebody. I don't know where it was, but then I went into a meeting. I met a guy. I went to the first meeting. I threw it out right away. Like, I've been sober for 4 years, but I need help with my emotional sobriety. I cannot handle it myself anymore. I put out a calling card right away. One of the guys in there was Mikey from our group,
Railroad Mikey,
and he came in, and he was like, "Hey man, come to this group," and it was Spiritual Underground, and I'm super thankful because this is exactly where I needed to be, and it was the group of people that I needed to be around. And some sobriety spots are better than others, and this one fit me perfectly because it was about emotional sobriety. It was about spirituality. It was about that next level of sobriety, like, not just being sober, because I don't want to be sober. I was sober by myself, and I fucking hated it, and I hated who I was, and I kept trying to move forward in this material world, but it wasn't producing any internal change. Just like that same guy that was standing in a fucking bar in Tokyo feeling like a piece of shit with everything in his pocket, cars, girls, cool guy status, money, everything. I was meditating, I was sober, I was trying to progress my life in every other manner, and it was working, but I was still unhappy. And so to come into this group, Spiritual Underground, and then I was able to hear those little pings, something that set me off, or I would read something in a spiritual book and it would set me off and set me to a new path, and be able to hear that. But I would get one of those every 6 months. I would get maybe one of those, maybe once a year. I would get while I was drinking and before I was meditating, and then I was meditating, and I might hear it maybe once every 6 months, and then it really, and it got sober, but it was still like, it was still every 6 months I was getting this kind of like little ping where something would change, and I would hear where I was supposed to go, and I would know that was the direction I needed to leave. And so I got into Spiritual Underground, and I would hear 6 pings a fucking night. Every week I was coming in there and ping, ping. Something was setting off and telling me the way I needed to move. And it took me a long time to do my first to get a sponsor, to do my first sets of steps, because maybe I wasn't coming from that moment of desperation that other people came from. I was sober, I had a career, I had all these, I was money and cars and all that stuff. It was the best part of my life on the financial spot and stability spot. But it was still, it took me a long time to do that. And then over the past year, so I've been now in AA for 4 years. It took me probably 2 years to get through my first set of steps. I still never picked up a sponsor. I still didn't do much surface work. But then over the last year, worked with Christopher. We worked through the book, the 12 Steps of Spiritual Recovery. We worked through that book rather than going back through the big book. It's all based off the big book. We're still doing the same steps. We're still doing it. It's just an interpretation of those steps, and a little bit further dive into what set you up for this position. Like, what were those early family experiences, those school experiences, those traumas in your life, all those things that set you up to have this disposition. Not just you were genetically set up to be a drunk. Yeah,
deeper dive into those causes and conditions that end up. Well, that's why I want to go back, and when we do these stories, why I want to go back and talk about a little of that rather than just starting out with some later on date or first drink or something like that.
Right. And so that was to go through this, and I kind of got set off, and it's worked so much. Like, once I started doing the steps, like meditation worked for me, it helped me, but there was a level at which I couldn't pass, because meditation, I didn't want it to be about a higher power or God or anything else. I wanted it to be about me. I wanted to be the enlightened one. I wanted to be better than you by showing you that I'm enlightened. Like, look how good I am. I got rid of my ego. I'm great.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of... But it really was, like, it was really about me. And so then as I did these 12 steps, I started working through some of my stuff. I started to understand what my blocks were with my higher power. That was a big thing for me in this book. And this step work was to figure out what was blocking me from a higher power to begin with. Part of it was the trauma of losing my friend. That was the exact time that I stopped going to church and stopped going. And two was all those concepts of those people that were judging me and telling me I was a bad kid, but then I should follow this God that teaches loving kindness. But you're a bad kid.
Yeah.
You're the bad one. So, like, and we're going to judge you, but this is, I couldn't reconcile those two as...
then it's a mixed message thing, man, and it gets through to us, and you go, hold on, those two things don't add up. You can't offer me this and tell me that. That does not fly with me. Right. So I will reject your entire premise because of that.
Right. And really what I was doing as to look at those God blocks, I was just rejecting you. You rejected me, you judge me, you tell me I'm a bad kid. I'm just rejecting you.
Yeah.
And I'm rejecting what you're standing for too. And it wasn't rejecting my higher power, my love and kindness, like all those things that kept me safe, that kept me alive when my friend was killed, that kept me out of jail, that opened my eyes when I was drunk and high, and just gave me a moment to say, this isn't what is going to lead me into my life. And so many people want to come to me and say, oh man, you used to fight, you fought Anderson Silva, you fought this guy, you were the best, you were one of the best guys in the world and all this stuff. They think the time of my life that my use and this former life of mine is super interesting, and I think my recovery is super interesting, because that was the most miserable time of my life. If I look at that, I was so miserable. I was miserable because if you just thought this one thing was going to fix your life, and you worked your entire life to get there, and then you get there and you recognize that it's not. It was so depressing. It was so absolutely flattening, and I was miserable at that point. And that's why I increased my use. I didn't know what else to do. Like, there was no fucking purpose for me. I didn't have a higher power. I didn't have a connection to my spirituality. There was no purpose in my life. And so I didn't have anything else to do but use. And to continue that old identity. So now when I come out, I think this is the most interesting part of my life. Yeah. This, to me, is the best part of my life. Like that, like everybody wants to talk to me about that. I'm like, I'd rather talk to you about meditation. I'd rather talk to you about like what's going on in my life now. Let me tell you about that, because, you know, I'm a nurse. I walk into I worked on the ICUs and, you know, would come in and just help people in the worst periods of their life, right. The worst days of their life, just like the worst day of my life. And I can remember that guy joking, and I got to be there, and I got to walk people through letting their family member go because they couldn't do it. I got to be there and have people dying people say, I see a glow around you. I see an aura around you. Like, to have people and tell them, I'm going to see you in the next life. Like, you know, be there when a mother says goodbye to her 21-year-old son, and you know, I just experiences that I could not explain. Yeah. You know, to be there for people when they're dying of cancer and all these things, and to be there for them in their most vulnerable moments and disclose stuff about me in my most vulnerable moments, you know.
That whole, like, what's making me think of is the St. Francis prayer, that make me an instrument, you know, so that I can do this higher power work and be that, because that's what that is, man. That's higher calling kind of stuff, to be able to hold that space for people when they're in their worst spot, but you can be glowing and you can be there as a beacon to allow them to have some power through you to get through things that let me comfort rather than be comforted. The whole gist of that prayer is exactly that, is standing there and being it. And there's really no, you know, like you said about a purpose, there's nothing bigger. You know, the whole spiritual axiom of helping another person, you know, that's in our 12 step, right? And that's what it says, it's help somebody. Yeah. You know, in a way it says carry this message to them, but we are everything in the 12 steps. When you have a problem, almost every time the solution is helping somebody else. You know, if you're having trouble with sex, help somebody. If you're having trouble with, if you got some resentment, help somebody. Now, we got some other tools to pray, ask it to be removed. We do inventory. We share with another person. But that bottom line period at the end of every sentence is then help somebody. Yeah. And then and then you find yourself in this role that a higher power, the universe, puts you in, where you have this fundamental spot where you get to help these people in a very unique and very, very powerful and very needful way. That is just super cool.
The one of the things, as we talk about, like, helping people, that is probably, and I held off, and I didn't sponsor people, and I didn't do this, and I was very selfish. I was like, I need to go to school, I need to finish my career. I'm like, I'm doing all this stuff, like, I didn't, you know, I didn't really finish my steps or whatever it was. Me. Right. I had lots of excuses of why I couldn't do it. And then finally, you know, as I started through these, the second set of doing somebody came to me, and it was somebody that has been in our group for a while, and he just wanted something a little bit different, and you know, he'd already been through it, so it was. But to get the coolest part for me is when I get to say something that I know it's not me. Yeah. That it's not my words. I'm not that smart. Like, I'm not that calm and collected. I'm not that guy. You know, like, I know what my thought process and what runs in my brain all the time. I've been around that crap for 42 years. I know exactly what this guy says, you know, and to have something come out of me that's not me, that is the coolest part, because I thought it was super cool to hear that. That was that ping through life that told me where to go, and to be able to listen to it a little bit. But to be able to hear that ping come out of your own mouth and know that you just changed your child's life, changed a friend's life, changed the sponsee's life. You can watch it come out and know that that's resonating with them, because it's not your words. I think that's the coolest part for me. That is super, no doubt. I mean, and as you start sponsoring people, and I've had
I've been honored to be able to sponsor quite a few guys in a short amount of time, and have a really good bunch of guys, higher power placed in my life that are doing the deal, and I hear myself say things. What's really wild is when somebody quotes you. Somebody says, well, I heard Dan say, and you're like, man, I didn't really say that. That's not really me. It might have come out of this tool over here, but it wasn't really me. And it is. And that's when I start knowing, there's a flow, right? And you're talking about them pings, and being able to hear those next steps and see the path, and the path becomes clearer to me. Mm-hmm. And it sounds a little arrogant when I even say it, but I know that's the truth. And I know when I'm able to help these other people and I see what the changes that happen in their life also, I know that I'm on my path. I like my yoga term of that true north alignment. Mm-hmm. When my internal compass is in alignment with my true north, things just become easy. They flow. I see things almost in an out of body kind of thing. You talked about that, seeing that. I heard that when you were talking about the wreck and having that out of body, looking at yourself. Sometimes I get that in this work where I see me working with another guy, and I'm not really in the body for a minute. It's an out of body thing. It's and it's scary, too. It can create some fear. But to lean into it, and to be able to do that more and more of that, that's, to me, that's really my increased reliance on this higher power. Oh, that's proof in the pudding there when I'm doing that, because it's not really me, man. I am leaning on this higher self, this higher power, to be that instrument, that funnel to pull what was given to me and be able to hand it to somebody else.
That's cool stuff. I know, I've never heard you say that, and that's, I can imagine where that would bring fear, and I know that, even, in my mind is I'll get deja vus. I got a deja vu sitting here talking, and we were talking earlier specifically about.
Me too. I get that too, man.
And when I get that, I kind of feel like, well, this must be where I'm supposed to be going, and I don't really know why that. And you talked about when you get your true north line with that purpose, things just get easier. And I've experienced that to a smaller degree, in the fact that my kids get into the school that I need them to get into, so I can be of service to my father-in-law who now has cancer. That happened. That happened for a reason. And are just so, because if I'm worried about working and paying for school, then I can't take my time and devote that to my father-in-law who had cancer. Things get easier when you go the right way, and that is to the diametrically opposed to what we said earlier. I can't get right. Yep. I can't get right. And I can remember that feeling my entire life. I can't get right. I'm banging my head on the wall. Shit won't work. It never works. It never works for me. I'm fucking cursed. And that was my mindset, is shit worked. I had people go, man, you just have a dark cloud over you. Shit always falls apart. Whether I'm collapsing it or not. That was my story. That was how that worked. That was what occurred in my life. Everything falls apart on me. And that was how I lived. And that is so opposed to this, that now things open up. Things become easy, because it's not about what I want, how I want it, what I want to make it look like, whatever it is. It's about just following the pings. Following that little beep, following that that noise of how, and that's all I have to do is just follow that ping, and I'm okay.
Yep. Yeah. Kevin will quote Dawn on things about taking the next stitch. The tapestry is not my. Those stitches are pings to me. That's the same. That's a parallel way of saying that. You know? For me, I look at it as this path. I ask. That's one of the things I pray for every day, is to help me see the path.
Right.
Just help me see what direction you want me to go in. So that I can follow it, because I know it's out there. There's no doubt in my mind that it's there. Right. It's not a matter that I don't have a path. I just need the light shined on it, and that's where those pings come through. When I know when I'm taking the next right stitch, when I'm doing the next right thing. That other thing that popped in me, because Bill's book the Alcoholics Anonymous book has so many prophetic sayings. They're just really cool. That I'm the victim of the delusion that I can wrest happiness and satisfaction if I just manage well. So when things aren't going right for me, I'll just try harder. And then that has the opposite effect. Of that. Right. And I heard somebody say, I want this, but I can't have it. Is what I'm telling myself. I want this, but I can't have it. I want this, and I can't have it. And I start living that, right? It's the opposite of the power of positive thinking. If I'm sitting there telling myself that I want this, but also in the back of my head, I'm saying I can't really have it. I got to work harder, or I gotta figure out. And the universe doesn't know what to do when I'm sending that message out.
Right.
That I want this, but I can't have it. Or that whole, that white knuckle kind of thing. When I relax into the flow, and I think that's where meditation helps. I think that's where a lot of these other tools, where I'll drop these blockages. They're like barbs the wrong direction in my path, and they're just hooking on everything. And when I drop all them, I can fold them back more or less, so that they're not just obstructing me any longer. Then I can just sail, and that's what's happened to me in the last 4.5 years of being in recovery.
That resting. Satisfaction from the world, that is absolutely my go-to, is just try harder.
Yep.
Just work harder. You just not doing enough. You need to do more. And I didn't realize that that try harder and you're not good enough are tied together.
Yeah.
And for me, I used effort as my greatest tool. I'll just work hard. Whatever it is, I'll just work as hard as I can.
And in and of itself, it's not a bad thing, right? I mean, it's a good trait at some level.
At some level. But also, it's pathologic in my case.
Right.
Because mine, and you see it in a lot of people, not just alcoholics. You see this in people that are workaholics, that have to strive so hard. Everything that I've done, it's not good enough. And I have to strive harder and work harder. And that rest, and it goes to that statement right there, that I'm trying to wrest my satisfaction out of this world. And it takes time, because I'm still in that process. Like the other day, my hospital's the hospital that I work at is potentially closing. And for me, so I'm like, I got to start wheeling and dealing. I got to start figuring things out. I got to take away this easier job, and I got to go back to the ICU to get my stuff up and do this and do this and do this. And then I realized I'm 2 years down the road, still resting. And I'm still going to be working. And then I got to plan this and do this for a year and do that for a year. And then I'm 2 years down. I'm still 2 years away from this situation now. Trying to rest it. And I said, you know what? I can't do that. I got to pull my hands up. I gotta ghost ride the car right now. I gotta ghost ride it and lift my hands up and just see what happens. Like, if we shut down, we shut down, and if and let that next step be that next step.
Yep. Yeah, it's another one of the things, and I haven't used it in a while, but a guy had told me once is on my higher powers, like being on a tandem bicycle, and he'll let me steer, but my job is really to pedal. And let the steering to be to somebody else.
Right.
But I still have the pedal. I still have some horsepower I need to help provide to get where I'm going. But I gotta turn loose the wheel and release my grip on that. Because every time I have a grip on something, I mostly strangle it.
Yeah, I absolutely understand that feeling, but it is new. It is new. I've watched some of you guys like you and Shane and other guys be able to kind of work this program at a higher level, and to have those rewards and to have that mentality to lift your hands up. And I'm just at the infancy of it, right? Because I'm still in school. I'm 42. I'm still trying to get to that next level, get to that next thing.
You were around, and we those three people you just mentioned, me, you, and Shane, all have the same teacher too, and are working these steps in that you said in that certain interpretation. I like that.
Yeah.
What I look at it is to me, it's an optimized level of working these steps. I won't say it's the,
right,
but it is an optimized version of working these steps and putting these tools in our lives. And you're just on the tail end of it just recently.
Yeah.
So like, to me, like it's just now you're the airline's landing gear are just starting to pull off the ground. That's where you're at because of coming off of that step work in that particular fashion.
Yeah, and I like the and to your statement there. The and this is an addition to this program, or for those that aren't in AA, this is an opportunity to do that. And I didn't get as much as I wanted out of the first set of, and part of that is how I worked them and how I did them, and it wasn't anybody's fault, but I just didn't work them as well as I could have, or do all the things that I could. So to come through and to have that, especially, I mean, this is the last year. I've basically picked my hands up off of graduate school too after I started this program with Christopher, because things stopped being as important to me, and this work became more important to me. Yeah. And so I've been happy to go through this. And this is, like I said, other people think that part of my life's interesting. I think this part's interesting.
Yeah. I will mention too the humility that you have has impressed me big time on that prior life, and then what you said there just put some real concrete foundation under the feelings that I was having on, because and this may be not exactly true, but here's me, okay? If I was an old MMA fighter and I had that background, I would be in there telling people to Google me, go look, go see, do this, look up this fight. Go watch me, and I've never ever, now I've heard you mention casually and over time about this past life. I never, for whatever reason, there was something in me that never made me, I never doubted it, but I also never felt the need to go validate to see if you were telling the truth or any of that either. I never did look. Yeah. I just accepted it at face value. That's another, really a recovery miracle, to sit in a room and listen to people and just accept what they tell me, rather than do the old bullshit where I would want to analyze and debunk you, and that guy's full of shit or all that. It really is a recovery miracle. But you were always so humble about that. And in recent past, some friends of ours have started sharing some links and stuff. And so I've actually, in just the recent few months, have popped on and saw some of that old footage and stuff, and the Anderson Silva thing, and another fight that just blew me away that I watched, where you, from all appearances, you were getting your ass kicked, and at the end you won.
Yeah. Is that the Joe Riggs fight?
Man, I don't know. It looked like it was Russian. Everything was subtitled Russian, and the actual, I think even the YouTube title of it is written in Russian. It might be Finnish.
I fought over in Finland.
Okay, yeah, it's got some language. I can't read. I can hear the announcers. The announcers are speaking in English, but the actual video itself is, the title of the video is in another language. And
that's just probably because you can't like UFC, and they'll take away stuff that's there, because they own the rights to so much stuff, so they'll take away rights, and so you can't control the Russians or whoever else. They'll put anything on YouTube.
Right. So that was, and I'm just inspired by that humility, because I would think like that. I would have to validate myself. Right. And prove to you all that I was really telling the truth. And you've never done that. You've always just been so humble about it, and just so matter of fact, because that's not really the story you're telling. What you're telling today, when I hear you share in meetings and when I talk to you on a personal level, is exactly what you just said. What's going on today, this recovery path, this cool stuff that's happening now, these miracles and these bells that go off, where we hear things of what the cool stuff that's happening today.
I think part of that, one, is the genuine that it's better today than it had ever been. Two, it was the worst point of my life. The only positive that came out of that situation was, I'm not a person that can believe through you telling me that that's not going to make me happy. I have to see it and live it. And so I was the opportunity from my higher power was, look, here you go. This is it. It's not going to make you happy. So I had to be shown.
Here's everything.
Are you happy? You're not. Okay, well, then let's go a different direction.
Yeah, very cool. Insight to that, no doubt.
So for me, that was the biggest thing, and I'm thankful for that opportunity. That's really the only positive that came out of that situation. One, I met my wife and my father-in-law, and that pain led me to spirituality. But really, that's it. Is like it wasn't going to make you happy. Now I'm going to put the people in your life. Like I would not leave. I had offers to go everywhere in the world, to train at every camp in the world, almost to go to Holland, to go to Seattle, to go to LA. All these people that at that time were saying, "Hey, we'll open the doors. You can come and join our team. We're one of the best teams in the world." And I wouldn't leave because I needed to be around my father-in-law because of who I thought he was and what I believed of him, and he helped show me by taking me to that cleansing, helped change my life. So, I mean, again, that was one of those things. The right people in my life were put in that place. You also said in there, like, I would have to validate myself. But living that experience didn't bring me any validity. It didn't validate any part of my experience. So to reference that, it's just to reference the pain.
Yeah,
for
that's
me.
Really interesting to me.
And
that's
it's nothing else.
Yeah, and I didn't really understand that. It's one of the things. Well, I guess one of my points here is that today's conversation helped me actually understand that better, because so I looked at it and I just really couldn't. It did not compute of why a guy wouldn't talk more about what was going on then. Sometimes a little bit like I say what I thought was the darkest part of my life actually ended up being the best thing ever.
Yeah,
it's still dark.
Right.
Getting in all that trouble and looking at a huge big potential prison sentence and all that was awful. Mm-hmm. But it catapulted me into what I have today. And without that moment, I don't know that I would be where I'm at now. Another thing I heard you say a minute ago too was that ability to correct your course and to be able to say, "Oh yeah, no, that's not the way." Like one of my favorite things to say or I've heard is, and I will say that most anything I've picked up is. I did not make any of this up. I've heard it and stole it from somebody else, picked it up and used it from them. Is that a lot of times I don't know what my higher power's will is for me. I don't necessarily know what it is, but almost always I know what it is not.
I've absolutely had that feeling like I don't know the way to go, but I just know that's not the way. Over there is not the way. I'm not going to go that direction because that. And again, that was the direction when I stopped drinking, and the monk told me you have to stay because I just knew I couldn't go to that direction. I'd already been there. I'd already done it, and I'd already checked it all out, and there was nothing on that end. And now it was time to go a different direction.
It's a fascinating story, man. It really is.
I appreciate it. One thing that I just wanted to add to this was for me, even coming into the program, having been sober for 4 years, it took a long time for me to even accept that I was an alcoholic. Even though if you look at this carnage and all this stuff and you break it down into an hour conversation and you say, hey, look at all this, look how bad your life was before. I still couldn't see that. Even 4 years removed from alcohol, I didn't drink every day. I might have drunk, the most I've ever probably drunk in a row was 5 days in a row. That was in my entire life. Like I always had something that I was working towards. And I think for people like, people that have the same mentality as me is that I'm not this because I can still have a job. I can still be a career. I can still be successful. I can still do these things. Like, I didn't have some crazy bottom, of my life. I had these terrible things and traumas occur, but it's still at the same time. I don't know what I'm just trying to say is I want to reach those people that are wavering or thinking that this is something. All those guys out there that almost got there. Because for every world champion, there's 1,000 guys like me that almost got there.
Yeah.
And can't let go of it. And that's who I want to reach towards is those people that think that there has to be some gutter drunk to be an alcoholic, or you have to do something specific to be an addict. This is just, if you're using, doesn't work, and you want something that does work.
Yeah. Or maybe even, and so to go with Christopher's stuff, maybe you're not even using.
Right.
chemicals, but we're
Right.
all using something for some relief, right?
Success.
We're all using something,
Achievement.
whether it's a workaholic. I will validate myself by working my ass off, and provide for my kids. They don't ever get to see me,
Right.
but I'm out there slaving away, and just all the other various things that we can do to receive this validation when, like what you said, when you finally turn loose of it and realize that this, it's the old thing of this inside job. It's coming to grips with me and finding me.
Yeah.
That's where the happiness resides. It doesn't reside out there in any of that other stuff.
Right.
And you certainly can't appreciate it until I can be okay here.
Right.
Like, I like having stuff, right? I mean, we like things. I like sex. I like food. But all of it is dampened by not liking me. Once I can be okay and be comfortable with me and be comfortable in my own skin, because that's another way of looking at all that old stuff we were talking about, that not feeling good enough, feeling wrong, feeling like the bad boy. Yeah. All that is also can be wrapped up under the umbrella of not being comfortable in our own skins.
Yeah.
Until I can get comfortable in being me, I can't really appreciate anything else. I can't appreciate you. I can't love you until I can do that with me. I can't love my children until I can be okay with me. As long as I feel that there's some kind of stink I'm carrying around, I don't get to have this other side of things.
Yeah. Well, it's been. I appreciate this opportunity, and I hope this goes out to some people that need to hear it.
Well, you've done a fantastic job, because like a lot of times I have to not pull, but direct more. Today I really felt very comfortable, and your story just flowed. And like sometimes I'm like, we got started on the early stuff, and then we got into the middle stuff, and then we got to the end stuff, and you talked about the miracles without me having. So usually I want to say, hold on, tell me a few things, but you kicked it, you shared those freely, just as a course of telling your story. So you were very, I don't know, did you do a lot of public kind of stuff under the fighting?
Well, I mean, you talk and you interview and stuff like that, but not like extensive, not really like where you're showing this.
Because you're very comfortable feeling more so than some people. A lot of people are very, some people come walking in here and they got no microphone experience, no kind of any of that, and they come in very conscientious of the microphone, and it takes a minute to warm up, and you didn't have that. You just kind of naturally come in here and sat down and did the deal. I usually ask people for a concluder at the end of the show and say, hey, man, we got any final words? And you just did it without me saying anything.
So one thing is like, I'd like probably a little bit, like I've been interviewed and had whatever, like little specials to do or whatever. But at the same time, like, I'm an alcoholic. I like talking about me, right? So this for me, this microphone doesn't even exist. I'm looking at you. We're talking about this. So
and that's the same way I get too. Now, I had a little of the microphone thing for a while, just knowing and being conscious of it. Of course, I've been doing, I think this will be the 30th interview one I've done.
Oh, wow.
And then there's another half dozen or so other ones that were round table, multiple people, things like that. But yeah, I think today is the 30th. I started them with a 100. And this is 130, so it's probably 31 if you counted them. But I think that. But anyway, so now I'm getting pretty comfortable, and I like doing it. But I watch the other people not necessarily do that. So, man, I am totally. My hands moving?
No. I'm like the Ricky Bobby thing, where there's like, I don't know what to do with my hands.
Yeah. Don't know what to do with them.
Doesn't kind of come across on a podcast.
I want to get the video element, but I just got to figure out how to attach that and how to do it, and like the editing and stuff. Would be we did one which is I could just set a camera up there on the two of us and do that. Mm-hmm. It's a little distant. I'd like to have like a camera on you, a camera on me, a camera on us, and somebody pushing buttons, switching the camera angle according to who's speaking. Right. That's what my old buddy Joe Rogan has on his podcast.
I've met Joe Rogan several times.
Have you? In the fighting world?
Back in the fight game,
Yeah, because that's what... because he's my inspiration for doing this more above than anybody else is Joe Rogan. I just watch him.
One time I was completely obliterated, but he would come up and talk, because he would be at the fights that I was at, and like I think maybe the fight you were talking about where I was getting hammered, that was like kind of like he was always watching. He'd come up and talk to me about the fights afterwards. I don't know. He had some. he's a crazy dude too. He
does a lot of MMA shows too.
Right,
on
right.
his podcast. Some of them are just totally dedicated to MMA, and I watch those with the same interest usually as I do the ones when he's just got normal guests.
It kind of blows me away that like he's been so successful just being himself.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
absolutely.
That I don't think this is manufactured. Like he loves jiu-jitsu. He loved jiu-jitsu before jiu-jitsu was cool, you know, and he just did that kind of stuff, and it kind of blows me away that you can be that successful. Just
that's that.
you.
I think that's that getting aligned in that true north alignment thing where he it came easy to him or natural to him or whatever to get in line with his true self, and then ended up giving him this just massively cool career to do all these cool things.
Right.
So cool, man. I really appreciate you being here.
I appreciate
I've
you
been
having
looking
me.
forward to it, and I'll do the little sign off here. Once again, 12-step spiritual recovery. Those are that optimized 12 steps process Alex and I were talking about, and it's in book form, and you can do it. All you have to do is get your hands on that book, and hell, we'll help you do it too. So it's 12-Step Spiritual Recovery by James Christopher Cohn at Amazon. DTMWW.net for my woodworking and handyman business. Music is by Darren Frank. Go to spiritualunderground.org for show notes and pictures of the guests and my contact me page through this deal. Hell, there's Instagram, there's YouTube, there's all kinds of Spiritual Underground podcasts blowing up. So check it out. Thank you all for allowing me to participate in my recovery in this manner today. Peace out.
You say you're searching for your true love, but you keep looking right past me. I don't quite know how to take that. I guess you don't like what you see. So I work hard to change my outsides, all the while I'm dying within, holding back the pain is sometimes tough. When will love be enough? I want to hold you, let dreams unfold with you, but there's nothing I can do until love is enough. When will love be enough? They tell me, boy, live in the real world. Gotta set your sights on someone else. You can't make anybody love you. You gotta learn to love yourself. My heart says hold on to your dreams, son. My head says find somebody new. Living in the middle sure feels rough. When will love be enough? I want to hold you, let dreams unfold with you, but there's nothing I can do until love is enough. When will love be enough? I want to hold you, let dreams unfold with you, but there's nothing do until love is young.